Hello builders, welcome to another video here on Majestic.cloud. My name is Laszlo and today I'm going to talk about the Web Application Firewall from AWS. Before we start, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any of the upcoming videos. So, what is a Web Application Firewall? Let's see the definition from Wikipedia. So it says that the Web Application Firewall is a specific form of application firewall that filters, monitors, and blocks HTTP traffic to and from a web service. By inspecting the HTTP traffic, it can prevent attacks exploiting a web application's known vulnerabilities such as SQL injection, cross-site scripting, file inclusion, and improper system configuration. Now, that's the definition, but actually you can use the Web Application Firewall from AWS to do much more than that. So let's see what we can protect with the Web Application Firewall. Let's suppose you have an application which is composed of an API gateway and one Lambda function or many Lambda functions, it doesn't matter. You could also have for example, an application load balancer which has an auto-scaling group behind, and that has several instances that are serving your traffic. You could also have something like an Amazon CloudFront distribution, which you use to serve static content to your users. Now, your users will make requests to any of these types of systems. So they will make a request to one of the systems, to another one, to the third one. But besides your users, there are also some other actors out there. So bad people, hackers, bots, which will try to do requests to your systems as well. So by doing this, they might overwhelm your system, sending too many requests. Or they might, for example, try to exploit some known vulnerabilities, try to do SQL injections, things like that. So you want to prevent that. And the Web Application Firewall allows you to do that. So you can actually add AWS WAF in front of these types of systems. And then your users can make the request and they will be accepted and sent to those endpoints. But if a bad actor sends a request, then that request will be blocked based on certain rules that you set up. So you will have to set up these rules, and there are different types of rules for all kinds of things. So for example, if you want to protect against SQL injections, there's a rule for that. If you want to protect against too many requests in a short interval of time, then you can do that as well. So let's actually look at this in the AWS console and see how can we set up AWS WAF. So let's start by looking at what we want to protect. I have an API gateway set up here. This is just the example API gateway that AWS provides, this pet store API. So what I want to do, I want to protect this API from unwanted requests. And for that, I'm going to use AWS WAF. So let's go back to the management console and let's search for WAF here on the top. It's called WAF and Shield. Let's open it. And here you have this menu item called Web ACLs, or Access Control Lists. And we want to create such a Web ACL. So you see here, we have to select a region. My API gateway is in Oregon, so I'm going to choose Oregon. This is required for API gateways or load balancers. If you were going to set up a WAF for CloudFront, then you will use the global CloudFront item here. And then you can only create a CloudFront distribution Web ACL. But let's go to Oregon now. And let's create us Web ACL. or a Web Application Firewall ACL. Now I'm going to call this my default WAF ACL. I could provide a CloudWatch metric name, and here I have to select which type of resource I want to protect. Do I want to protect CloudFront distributions, or I want to protect something else? So meantime, I got signed out. Sorry for that. Let's get back in, and let's go back to WAF. Just a moment. So let's start again. My default web ACL, and as well as I was saying, do I want to protect a CloudFront distribution, or I want to protect something else, like a load balancer? I could protect AppSync, GraphQL APIs, API Gateway REST APIs, Cognito user pools, or even Amazon App Runner services, which was added just recently to WAF. So I'm going to protect API Gateway, so I'm going to choose this one. And here I could immediately associate it with the resources I want to protect. So I can add AWS resources here, and you see I have the different types of resources it can protect. And if I select API Gateway REST APIs, it will show me the prod stage of my pet store API. And I'm going to just click add, and this is going to be my protected resource. Then let's click on next. And here I can add rules. So these are going to be the rules that will define what kind of requests I want to accept and which I want to reject. And here also I can select the default operation mode for the web ACL. So by default it will allow the requests unless there is a rule that is matched and that says otherwise. Or I could block everything, and my rules could be set up in a way that they allow certain requests. But I'm going to go for the allow everything unless there's a match in the rules. So let's add a rule. So when you add rules, you can add two types of rules. You can add managed rules or your own rules. So managed rules are created by someone else, a third party or AWS. And these are rules that you have to pay for, and they come with some default things. Let's look first at these managed rules. So I'm going to click on managed rule groups, and these are the providers of the managed rules. You see there are AWS managed rule groups, and here you have the prices for them and things like that. So for example, the boat protection rule, the boat control rule, if you add this to your web ACL, will filter out all kinds of requests that are coming from boats. And AWS has a pretty good idea of what are the boats out there on the internet. So you can select even by categories, so advertising boats, email clients, search engines, everything. So you have full control over which ones you want to allow or block. I'm not going to add this rule because it might block my requests, and I don't want to do that right now. So let's remove it. We also have the account takeover prevention rule. This will protect your login page against all kinds of things like credential stuffing attacks, brute force login attempts, things like that. You can check out this rule if you want to protect your login page. Then there are some free rule groups, for example, Amazon IP reputation list. So this group contains some rules that are based on Amazon Threat Intelligence, and it will block IPs that Amazon deems to be bad IPs. So they are known to be used by bad actors. And I'm going to add this one to my web ACL. Then there are some other managed rules, for example, the core rule group. These are rules for web applications. For example, the OWASP top 10 list, and if you click on the edit button, you see here what kind of rules are here. For example, if there is no user agent header, if the user agent or the body contains certain things. So these are rules that you can use to block all kinds of things. So for example, cross-site scripting, in the query arguments, in the cookie or the URI path, and so on. I'm going to use these because these are useful rules. So let's click on save, and I'm going to add this one as well. There are some other managed rule groups from AWS I'm not going to use. There are others by third parties. These are known providers like F5 or Fortinet. I'm not going to add them. These are all paid rules. I'm just going to add those two that I've selected, the IP reputation list. So I want to block all IPs that are known to be bad IPs, and I want to block all common exploits. And then click on next, 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 and create the web ACL. And that is a basic web ACL that I have created and associated with my API gateway, and it should block known bad IPs and known exploits. Now I'm not able to demonstrate these rules because I don't have a bad IP to use for this, but I'm going to add also some custom rules. So custom rules are rules that you are going to create, and here is my ACL. Here you could see some data if the ACL is set up for a long enough time. So let's go to rules and let's add some more rules, but this time I'm going to add my own rules and rule groups. So here I could add a rule, for example, to block certain IPs. Maybe I know certain IPs that are bad and I want to block them. Or maybe I have some IPs that I know that those are good IPs and I want to whitelist them. In this case, I would always allow these rules instead of blocking them. But let's create a generic rule, and instead of a regular rule, I want to create a rate-based rule. So rate-based rule will say I'm only willing to accept a certain number of requests per a 5-minute period from an IP address. So let's call this rate limit rule. And I want to say, okay, I want to accept 100 requests at most from a specific IP address in a 5-minute interval. So if that particular IP is trying to make more than 100 requests, all the requests will be blocked from that IP address. And I can use the source IP address or the IP address in the header. I could block, count the request. This is useful for debugging and false positive mitigation. I could present him a captcha or a challenge or something like that. I'm going to use block here, and I could even provide a custom response. So it will be a 429, and it will be error too many requests. So this will be presented back to the client when it's trying to make the requests. It will get this 429 HTTP error code with the header error too many requests, and that way it should know to slow down with the requests. Let's add this rule. So let's click on save. So I have a rate limiting rule now, and I also want to add another one. So this rule will be, before I do that, let's test my API. So I'm going to bring up Postman. Let's reload here my API and let's grab the URL. So where is the stage? Here's the stage. This is the invoke URL. Let's copy this one, and here's Postman, and I'm going to send a request to this pets endpoint, a GET request. Let's click on send, and you see I'm getting back a response. Okay, now if I'm going to abuse this and send lots of requests, after 100 requests in a 5-minute interval, I will get that to 429 error. But I want to add another custom rule in which I want to prevent these requests to reach my endpoint unless they have an authorization header. If the authorization header is not present, I want to reject the request, and it will not even get to API gateway and the Lambda behind the API gateways. So how do I do that? It's pretty simple. Let's go and add another rule, my own rule, and this will be no auth header rule. So here I want to inspect something. So you can reject requests, for example, if they are not originating from a country or they are originating from a country. You can inspect headers, cookies, query parameters, things like that, body, HTTP method. So I'm going to inspect a header, and this will be the authorization header. And I want to here use size greater than 0. So if the size of this header is greater than 0, and I want to negate this, so it doesn't match this statement. So here I could have matches the statement or doesn't match. So if it doesn't match this, so the size is not greater than 0, I'm going to reject the request. So in this case, I will not present a custom response to the client. I don't want him to know. Maybe he's a bad actor, and I don't want him to try to add now authorization headers and things like that. So if it doesn't have an authorization header, the request will be rejected. So let's add this rule. Let's save it. And now let's try to send more requests. It takes a while until it takes effect, but you see I'm getting back a message forbidden. So I'm not allowed to access the API gateway. Now if I add the authorization header, and let's leave it empty, I still don't get anything. Now of course if I add some header, it will respond, and I get a response. Of course you should check this this authorization header. It doesn't mean that you should accept anything that comes here. This is just an example to reject all the requests that don't have an authorization header. It's your task to set up here in the API gateway the proper authorizers, which will check if this authorization header is valid or not. But what we accomplished by this is that we are reducing the number of the requests that are arriving at the API gateway. So this way we are not putting a strain on our backend, fulfilling bogus requests from bots and other bad actors. Still, of course, again, I repeat, you should check that header here in the API gateway and make sure it's a valid one. But we managed to reduce the number of requests that are going to our backend this way. Now, of course, you could add, let's say, another rule and say, okay, reject country, and for example, if the request comes from a specific country, I'm just going to choose something random here, so Vietnam, and if the request coming from Vietnam, I'm going to block the request. So this is also a type of rule that you can set up. I'm not going to actually do this, I'm just going to cancel it out, but I just wanted to show you that you can do that as well. And then you have all kinds of controls here to present custom response bodies, logging and metrics, CloudWatch login sites. You should play around with it. It's pretty simple to set it up, and you have a lot of control on what you can do with your own rules. As you could see here, there are a lot of options that you can check and stop the request if it doesn't match us through your criteria. So this is AWS WAF, and this is how you can use it to stop certain types of requests. Hopefully you're going to be able to use it, and it will be helpful to reject unwanted traffic to your application. So this was the video for today. I hope you liked it. If you did, click on the like button, subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you soon with another video here on Majestic.cloud.